Hello friend, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Becky if you're new, and today we are celebrating New Year's. Even though it's the weekend after, I'm having friends coming over and we are having two different styles of homemade tamales. This morning, I already prepped one of the two desserts we're having. I started prepping both of the proteins and the beans are almost done. So let me bring you back to this morning, actually yesterday, what I did yesterday, show you all the stuff I prepped before I got ready, and then we're gonna come and open this Instant Pot and see if this beef is fully cooked, and we can get going on the next step of the tamales. This dinner prep needed to start the night before because we are gonna be cooking up some of these dried beans. These are beans that we grew in the garden this last year together, and I have been looking so forward to cooking them up and giving them a try. I really wanted to grow pinto beans in my garden last year, but I could not find a pinto bean that was a pole bean variety. That means it grows up on a trellis. And I remember I had grown these rattlesnake beans years and years ago for a green bean, but I remembered that the beans dried really well on the vine and I collected a bunch of seeds and they look like pinto beans. And so I have the thought, maybe I should look it up and see if they taste like pinto beans. And when I did some research, apparently these rattlesnake green beans, when dried and you harvest the seed, are supposed to taste like pinto beans. So we had grown these in the garden, harvested them, Josh and I shelled them, and today is the day we're gonna cook them up. So I tediously went through and cleaned out the beans to make sure there was no leaves or rocks or dirt or in them. And then I'm going to soak them overnight and we will cook them up tomorrow. I also got a bunch of things out because I knew it was going to be a busy cooking day. And so I grabbed some jars and some produce and put some butter out. I printed off my recipes. I got my pots and pans out and I turned the light off, went to bed, and woke up early the next day to do some prep that we're going to do right now. I happened to get up early on this day, so I was up well before my family. So I thought I would go ahead and get in the kitchen and get things started. The first dessert we're gonna make today is this choco flan cake. And I'm gonna go ahead and get the oven preheated while we make the components of this cake. This cake has 3 components to it, and it is absolutely stunning. And it's like nothing I've ever made before, so we are gonna attempt to make it on this day. I do not always get up and do things before my family gets up, but if I do, I really enjoy working in a quiet kitchen. And so on this day, since I was up, I thought, let's go ahead and get some of this meal prep done. So I'm grabbing out all of my mise en place or ingredients that I need for this cake. The bottom layer of this cake is actually a caramel layer, which we'll get to in a bit. And then you make a cake, a chocolate cake, and then you make the flan and you pour that on the top. And then in the oven, it does this crazy magic. And you will see how this cake is kind of mind-boggling. So the first thing I need to do is cream butter and brown sugar together. So I'm going to cream that together. That's supposed to cream for 5 minutes. So while that's creaming, I'm going to take 2 tablespoons of butter and butter my bundt pan really well. So we're going to make this cake in a bundt pan. I do end up getting in there with my hands so that I can make sure this butter is evenly distributed on the entire cake. Once I was able to do that, I am going to get some water onto boil because we're going to cook this cake in a bain-marie. So I kind of have a couple different things going. We have our butter and our sugar creaming together. We have water onto boil now, and now we're going to put the first layer of this cake down in the bundt pan. So you can see how well it's buttered. You can make a homemade caramel sauce or you can use your favorite caramel sauce, the recipe said. So because I'm doing so much cooking on this day, I thought I would just take the help of picking a caramel sauce up at the store. You're going to layer that in the bottom of the bundt pan, and then now that my butter and cream has creamed together for 5 minutes, we're going to get going on putting the rest of the ingredients in this cake, which is just your standard chocolate cake ingredients. This recipe and the recipes I'm going to be following will be down below. So we have brown sugar, butter, our leavening agents, salt, flour, vanilla, and chocolate, cocoa powder, salt, all mixed together. We're going to cream this together in the mixer, and then we're going to add some buttermilk. A couple of the other recipes we're going to be making, so this is one of 2 desserts. The second dessert we're going to be making is a brown butter salted Rice Krispie treat. My friend who's coming over today, she and her husband used to be in the Navy, And when they were in the Navy on deployment, I used to make them treats, and Rice Krispie treats was the one that I made the most often. And I would send them Rice Krispie treats and other treats homemade while they were on deployment all over the world. And so because they were coming over, I thought that I'm experimenting with this cake. We don't know if it's going to be delicious or not. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I make another dessert that we all think is delicious. And if you've never had a brown buttered salted Rice Krispie treat, I'm going to show you how to make it, and it is incredible. So now that we have the caramel and the cake layer done, we're going to make the flan layer, which is really easy. I've never made flan before, and it is, for this recipe, all it is half and half eggs, a little bit of salt, sweetened condensed milk, and you whip that together until it is evenly combined, and then you add vanilla extract. I used up all my vanilla extract in the cake portion of this recipe, and I didn't feel like going downstairs, so I just grabbed a vanilla bean and I cut it down the middle of the vanilla bean. I used the back of my knife to get out all those beautiful, beautiful seeds, and I'm going to put that in here. And I'm really glad I did this because it added a beautiful bean flecks, like the vanilla bean flecks were in the flan, and it was absolutely stunning. So I just whip all that together, and then I'm going to pour this flan mixture over top of the cake. And this is crazy to me. So we have our caramel at the bottom, then we have our chocolate cake, and now we have our custard. And this cake does this most crazy thing in the oven. The flan ends up going to the bottom and the cake ends up rising to the top. They don't mix together, they just completely flop, and it is like magic. It is crazy. I will show you what that looks like when it comes out of the oven. But for now, I'm going to cover this with foil, put this in a roaster pan in the oven, and then we're going to pour our boiling water very, very carefully around our choco flan cake. Now that our cake is cooking, I want to get going on one of the fillings for the tamales. We're actually going to get going on both of them. We need some chicken broth for making the masa portion of the tamales, and I had these chicken drumsticks in my freezer, so I thought what I would do is go ahead and poach these drumsticks. We're going to season them up with some garlic, some onions, salt and pepper, and some other seasonings. So we're going to cook the meat for the filling of the tamales, but we're also going to be making chicken broth at the same time so we can use that for our masa. So I'm going to get these drumsticks and aromatics cooking on the stove, and I wanted to get these done kind of first thing along with the cake so that these could be simmering. So once I got ready for the day, I would have not only my chicken poached and ready to go, but I could also have my beef as well. So we're making two different flavors. So we're going to do a chicken verde filling, and then we're going to do a chipotle honey enchilada sauce beef. So the first thing I need to do is grab out my Instant Pot, and I'm going to brown this roast. This is I think it was a sirloin roast on each side. And then we're going to get this cooking in the Instant Pot so that we can have a really shredded, beautiful beef. So while we're browning, I'm going to get going on the beans. So I'm trying to do as many things in the kitchen as once in the morning as I can, so that when I come back and I'm ready to assemble everything, I'm going to have a lot of the components ready for me to do. Now that I have the cake going, the chicken going, the beef browning, I'm going to go ahead and work on the beans. So in that pot, I just put in some lard, some onions from the garden, and peppers from the garden. They're frozen, so I'm going to saute those down a little bit. I can see that my beef is ready to be rotated, so I'm just going to rotate it so it can brown on the other side. And then I'm going to get some spices into this lard, onion, and pepper mixture. I have coriander, cumin. I'm going to stir that together, a couple chipotles in adobo. I do put pepper in there and a couple garlic cloves. Now, I'm not going to put any salt in this because I've heard from some sources that it's best to salt your beans at the end. So once I have my spices toasted, my onion sauteed, I'm going to add my dried beans, some water. I put the lid on and I'm going to let that simmer. And then now to our beef, since I have the beef browned, I'm going to add onions, garlic, honey, chipotles, and adobo, a good amount of salt, a good amount of pepper, and a jar of homemade enchilada sauce. And we are going to let this cook in the Instant Pot for 2 hours. I think it was on 2 hours that I ended up doing, because I want this beef super shreddy and tender and delicious. And the fastest way I can do that is to get this done in the Instant Pot. Now for the spices, the reason I went ahead and I toasted the spices in that lard with the onions and peppers is because a lot of the flavor components of spices are actually fat soluble. So if you really, really, really want to maximize the flavor on your spices, toast them in a little bit of fat first and you will get the biggest bang for your buck. So I have my chicken going, my beans going, my beef going, and now my cake is done. So I'm going to let that cake cool for a good hour, it said, at room temperature, and then we're going to pop that cake into the refrigerator. We're going to let the cake sit in the refrigerator for at least 2 to 3 hours before we try to turn it out. That was another reason I wanted to get my cake done really early, is because it needed to sit and set up in the refrigerator for quite a few hours before we could serve it. Now, it's a little bit later. My chicken is completely done and cooked through. I'm going to get my chicken out of the pot so that it can cool a little bit and I can remove the chicken from the bones. I'm going to put the bones back in this pot so that I can make a really, really yummy broth. I want a very, very flavorful broth so that we can make our masa with it. And that is why I kind of wanted to use these drumsticks. Drumsticks are not Josh and I's favorite. So I'm going to get the chicken off of it. We're going to use the chicken and the tamales, and then we are going to make a beautiful broth. So I'm kind of getting 2 different things done with one step, basically. The meat for the tamales and the broth for the masa part of the tamales. Now what I'm going to do is go get ready for the day, and I'm going to see you back right here while we finish putting this beautiful dinner together. It smells absolutely incredible in here between all the cooking and baking we have been doing. I just opened my Instant Pot and this is done. So I want to get the beef out of here and cooling so that I can shred it. And then I can strain this broth or sauce and we can get the excess fat off of it, and we can use this to make our delicious beef chipotle honey tamale. I also want to get going right away on the second dessert because that's not going to take me very long, and it'd be nice to have something that's completely done. I'm really nervous about the dessert that we're going to pop out. We're going to do that after we get these tamales assembled, because I put the dessert in the fridge and it's just chilling. While I'm waiting for that beef broth to separate, let's go ahead and get our chicken broth strained so that we can use this to make our masa. Our beans here are done. We need to give these a taste test, but before we do that, I want to get all the components of our tamales ready to go for us. That's why I put a pot of water on to boil, because we need to soak our corn husks. This almost did not happen today. Josh had to go to 4 different stores and I called 5 different stores because everyone was sold out because of the holiday. And we found it at one store and they had 1 package left and he had less than 15 minutes to drive to the store and pick it up. So I'm really glad that he was able to find that and that we are making tamales today, because ever since I had tamales last time, I've been wanting to make them again. I want to go ahead and taste this broth and make sure it tastes perfect while it's still hot. So if I need to add any salt to it, it'll still have time to dissolve. Oh my goodness, incredible. Now let's give our beans a taste test. I have them off here because they're fully cooked now at this point. I don't want them to overcook. I want these to be intact beans, not like a refried bean. All right, they taste good. They have a bit of a kick, but they also don't have much flavor. I haven't added any salt to this yet because I've heard that you don't want to salt beans until after they're cooked. And so I wanted to wait on that. I don't know if that's true or a myth. You all could let me know. Here is one of those garlic bulbs. I think I'm gonna go ahead and fish the garlic out so it doesn't get all smashed in there. I think I'm gonna fish out that chipotle too. I think it needs a little acidity, so I'm gonna add a little bit of apple cider vinegar, maybe about a teaspoon. Lemon juice would be good too, but I don't have any, which I realized just now. After sending Josh on a wild goose chase, he could have picked me up some because we're gonna make salsa here in a minute. So good. Wow. It's amazing what a little bit of salt and vinegar can do. So I'm gonna stir in just a little bit more salt. And that time it was a little bit of herb salt. And these beans are done. And I'm gonna go ahead and let them cool just a bit. I'll pop them in the fridge, and then before dinner, I'll reheat them. I don't want them to cook down anymore. My kettle is boiling, and I would say that these rattlesnake beans absolutely are a perfect substitute for pinto beans. They cook up and look just like a pinto bean. I'm just about to start soaking my corn husks, but I want to get my oven preheated because we are going to make a salsa, a roasted salsa in the oven. So that needs to be preheating while we do some other things around here. Can already smell the corn. I just rinsed out my Instant Pot liner, and we're gonna mix up our beef mixture just right back in the Instant Pot. And I'm gonna move this aside just a little bit. I'm gonna take a second now that my beef has cooled a little bit and just shred it in here. This is definitely a little bit more lean than what I'm used to. I think this was a sirloin, and I usually cook with chuck. And so I can tell that I'm gonna need to add quite a bit of that moisture back to add some really good sauciness to this beef. And then we need to give it a taste and adjust seasonings as needed. And because this is going in tamales, I'm gonna shred this a little bit smaller than I would if I was making tacos. This is probably more beef and chicken than we need for these tamales. I'm gonna make as many tamales as I can with the husks that I have. And then whatever chicken and beef doesn't go in the tamales, then we can go ahead and just eat that as meal prep in other types of dishes. Josh just came in and tried the pinto bean replacement, the rattlesnake beans. He said they were fantastic. So those will definitely be in my garden next year, which I'm really excited about, and I'll be able to plant the seed that I saved. I'm just pouring in this beautiful sauce that we made, and I need to give this beef a taste test because I haven't tasted it. I'm gonna leave out the little bit of grease that was at the top because I don't really want that in my tamale sauce. Let's give this a try. So good. That doesn't need anything. I'm glad I put the honey in there. It's not too spicy at all, but I am gonna put it on keep warm. The beef is now gonna just hang out there while we prep our chicken. So this is the chicken that I pulled off the bones. I'm gonna get this into the pot that we made our broth in, and we are going to put our sauce in here. So this is going to be a salsa verde chicken. My friend who's coming over, she said that there's a little taqueria place next to her house, and they have a chicken salsa verde tamale that is fantastic. So I thought I would try my hand at it. This is a jar of salsa verde that I made from the Garden Fresh tomatillos last year. We're gonna get this in here. And I'm gonna go ahead and mix this up with 2 forks and kind of break the chicken up a little bit more. I'm just using the same pot that we made the broth in so that we don't have to dirty up another dish. And it's gonna take me a second to kind of shred this chicken and mix it in with this sauce. I'm gonna give this chicken a taste test to see if it needs any seasoning adjustments. Perfect. It doesn't need anything. I'm rereading the dough mixture for the filling recipe. I will link this recipe down below for you. I'm not following the filling portion of this recipe, just the dough, because I have made this dough before and it's fantastic, so I want to make it again. I have some home rendered lard here that we're gonna use. I have some seasonings we need to use and a mixer, because we need to beat this masa in with the lard. And I'm using a new masa that I've never tried before. I can link this down below. I was watching a channel, and I will link her video where she was talking about this. She is someone who specializes in fresh milled flour, and she recommended this masa. It's Masienda, and this is an heirloom corn that is grown in Mexico. And so I thought I would give it a try. I got the white corn masa harina. I might not be pronouncing that correctly. And I am going to 1.5 this recipe because I want to get a lot of tamales. Let's smell it. Oh my goodness, it smells incredible. So this is an heirloom variety of corn. They have yellow corn masa, they have blue corn and red corn masa, but I got this on Amazon. I can link it down below. I went with the white corn for this. So excited to try this. The first thing we're gonna add to our mixer is our lard. This lard was frozen. After I render my lard, I like to keep it in the freezer, and I just put it on my counter last night to thaw so that it would be at room temperature. And we need 2 cups of lard. This lard was in my fridge, but I took it out this morning and it has now come to room temperature. To our lard, we are gonna add some chicken broth, and we're gonna beat this for 5 minutes with the chicken broth. Oh. Well, if I can. Gotta put this back on. While this is whisking and getting nice and fluffy, I just pulled out of my freezer one of these salsa packets that I made. I meant to pull this out and use it while the garden fresh produce were still coming in to see if I liked it so that I could make more, but I only made one, and you and I are gonna figure out if this is a good way to preserve salsa. All that's in here are garden fresh tomatoes that I washed and put in here, a couple diced onions, a couple diced jalapenos, and that is it. I have some freeze-dried cilantro that we can add to this salsa. I'm just gonna pour this into this baking dish. We're gonna roast this at 425 until it's nice and roasted. I have no idea how long that's gonna take. And then we'll blend it up with some cilantro, and hopefully I can find some lemon juice or lime juice around here. So this lard is looking really nice, but it still needs to beat, I wanna show it to you, for a few more minutes. To my lard mixture, I'm gonna go ahead and add my spices, which is cumin, coriander, salt, and pepper. Now I'm gonna add 6 cups of masa. Hopefully I have enough here. This is a 2.2 pound bag. I almost bought 2 of these, but then I decided to only buy 1. That's 2, 3, 6. And I have just enough to make a few corn tortillas. That's probably what I should have done first with this to really tell what this flavor is like. Oh, it smells so good. Now I'm slowly gonna drizzle in broth. You can use beef broth, veggie broth. I'm using the chicken broth. We need up to 4.5 cups, but we're gonna start slow and just slowly mix it in until we get the right texture. So I'm just putting in my 3rd cup of broth here, and that feels pretty good. I don't want to add too much broth. It should be the texture of a creamy peanut butter and should be spreadable. That feels pretty good to me. I think I'm going to go ahead and just add the rest of this broth, which would be 4 cups, and the recipe says you can add up to 4.5 cups of broth, and I think that's gonna be good. and then we're gonna beat it for a few minutes. So while this is continuing to mix in and beat, I will go ahead and finish cleaning up the kitchen. I have extra broth here. I was going to freeze this broth, but I don't really like working with frozen broth. I prefer it to be ready to go and already thawed for me. And I have an electric stovetop canner that is so easy to use. So I decided, even though I'm in the middle of a big cooking day, I'm gonna go ahead and get this canned so that it is shelf stable and I can pull it out of my pantry and use it, and I don't have to worry about thawing it first. And then the channel that I saw this corn masa on the first time was Grains and Grit. So that video will be linked down below, and she inspired me to actually buy my grain mill. I decided I'm gonna go ahead and jar these up and get them in the stovetop electric canner because I really don't want them in my freezer. My electric canner is so easy to use. I can get these canned up. Even though I'm cooking for a party, it's not gonna take me but a second to get the canner out, get this going, and then I have shelf-stable chicken broth, not frozen chicken broth, but I wanna use it. Now note, I am pressure canning this. I am not water bath canning it. You need a special canner in order to make shelf-stable broth. And push start, and it's just gonna beep at me when I need to push the next buttons. So I've been going back and forth whether or not I'm gonna put cheese in these tamales, and I think I'm going to. I did put my beef and my chicken in bowls because I want to wash the Instant Pot liner for one of our side dishes, and for one of the desserts, I need that big pot. So I have those soaking while we assemble the tamales, and then we can make those next two dishes. But I think first I'm gonna go ahead and get some cheese grated. I'm kind of surprised that was even a question, whether I was gonna add cheese or not. I think when the question is to add cheese or not to add cheese, at least for me, it's always to add cheese. So let me put this away. I gotta go run to the garage to grab the cheese. And then I think all of our components are basically done at this point for the tamales, because we still have another dessert we're gonna make and another side dish we're gonna make. I have Monterey Jack cheese. I think that will melt really well in this. Every component is now done, so we get to start to assemble now. We have our masa, our beef honey chipotle, and like enchilada sauce, chicken verde, our corn husks, and our cheese. I'm gonna grab a cookie sheet so we can put our finished tamales on something. And let me see how I want to arrange myself here so that I kind of have an assembly line. Maybe I'll put my cookie sheet up there, put my cheese to the side. Maybe I'll put my corn husks over here. As these corn husks have been soaking, I have been kind of rotating them so that they are evenly soaked. And maybe I'll start with like the chicken. I'll put this next to me. I want to make a lot of these because you can freeze them. I've never frozen them before. They're not hard. That's one thing I thought the first time I made tamales, they were going to be so incredibly challenging, but they're not. They're really easy. They just take some time. And to me, it was such a different thing, nothing like I'd ever cooked before, so it just felt intimidating, but it's really, really easy. The hardest part for me was figuring out when they were actually fully cooked. And you can get really creative with the fillings. So the first thing I'm gonna do is take some masa mixture and spread it on my tortilla. Hopefully I made enough. Does the recipe say how much I should put on here? Probably should do an even number or an even amount on each one. Let me look at my recipe, because they were perfect when I followed the recipe last time. Scoop about a 1/4 cup of dough onto each top center of the husk. So I'm gonna grab out one of my 2 tablespoon cookie scoops so I can try to do this evenly. And that is my canner. So that means I need to push the next button. That's why I love that canner. I can link that canner down below for you if you're interested in it. I love it because I can set it and forget it. Now I'm going to spread this evenly. First one done. I can just tell you right now that this masa had incredible flavor. My friend's husband, who is no stranger to tamales, was saying that it was one of the most flavorful tamales, not the filling per se. I probably could have, I can work on my fillings, but the actual masa portion, which is most of what a tamale is, he said it had the most incredible corn flavor. And when you read the back of the package of the corn masa that I bought, it says that it's a single origin corn from one farm in Mexico, which I think is really cool. So what I'm going to need to do is probably try the other corn varieties that they have, because they do have a red corn, a blue corn, a yellow corn, and a white corn. And I think it would be fun to do a big tortilla making day. I have never batch made corn tortillas. I do that with flour tortillas often, but I've never done a big batch of corn ones, and maybe that would be fun to try the different varieties of corn and just taste them and see the difference and see how different the yellow versus white versus blue versus red turn out. I love finding new fun ingredients to work with, and this was definitely a fun and unique one to work with. So here I'm just continuing to fill up the corn husk with the masa and the filling. It did really help using the cookie scoop. Because we are going to be steaming these, it is important to make sure you try to get an even filling so that they all are going to cook evenly in the steamer once we get to that part. These are great to make ahead of time. When I was looking at recipes, I could have made these the day before, but I just didn't have time to make these the day before. But according to the recipe, you can make these up to 3 days before you want to cook them. I'm about halfway done making the tamales, and I think my tomatoes and onions and things are all done here. I had the oven light on so that I could see what was happening and not forget about them. So what I'm gonna do is actually pull out my blender, because we're gonna make like a blended salsa. I wish I had froze a couple more of these packets so that I could experiment with different times and things like that. But time in the garden absolutely got away from me. So one is better than none. Woo! So what I'm excited about, I just dropped a tomato on my floor, is that there's a little bit of moisture in here, but because we roasted it, we cooked off some of that moisture that can kind of be created from the freezing process. I have some pickled red onions. I might use some of that brine in here for the acidity. I have not seasoned this, so I just put a good pinch of salt in there. I don't want this to be like a puree, but I do want it to be kind of a smoother salsa. Oh, that texture is looking great. Put that onion in there. I forgot the cilantro. The cool thing about this is freeze-dried cilantro from my garden. So this is onions, peppers, and tomatoes from my garden. And it can be really hard to get all of these things ripe at the same time to make a salsa. So by preserving it this way, it is working out, but is the flavor and texture there? Obviously, this is gonna taste different than a fresh salsa. I love to make a fresh salsa all summer long, but these tomatoes are cooked. Look at that. Oh my goodness, it smells divine. That texture is great. I'm gonna taste this now. It's obviously not gonna taste how I want it to taste when we actually eat it, because when we eat it, it's gonna be cold, and temperature does change the flavor of things. I'm gonna taste it with my fork first. I think I could blend this a little bit more. Oh wow, that tastes like summer. Definitely needs some more brightness. I'm not gonna taste it with a chip quite yet, because I'm gonna doctor up the flavors. I wish I had lemon juice. For substitution, I'm gonna put a splash of onion infused vinegar, a little bit more salt, a little bit of garlic. I should have put a couple cloves of garlic in here too. Pinch of coriander, pinch of cumin. Mix this up one more time. Now I'm gonna taste this with a chip. Oh, that texture is great. It's not too runny. So good. This was absolutely a success. I'm gonna get this salsa in here, and this is completely done. I'm gonna scrape out every last little bit. I will be making up more of these packets because look at the texture of that. It's not watery or runny or anything. So, so good. My canner is now actually canning and counting down. I have about 20 more tamales to go. I think I made double the amount of meat I needed, which is absolutely fine. The beef I'm gonna freeze and use it later as meal prep, and then the chicken I'll probably just leave out and we'll enjoy over the weekend. I'll find some other way to adapt it. Maybe I'll make like burritos or chicken quesadillas or something like that. What I started doing is starting to make more than one at a time, and that's definitely more efficient. I started out with just doing one at a time, and then I thought that that wasn't efficient. So then I started doing two, and finally I got to doing three, and that worked pretty well for me. I'm trying to make an even number of chicken ones and beef ones, and so that I just have an even-ish number of both flavors. Now, one thing to note that I did not do as well of this time as the times that I've made tamales in the past is when you're adding cheese, not that I am a tamale expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I noticed that I want to make sure that I fully enclose the cheese with the masa mixture, and I didn't do that on a lot of them. So the cheese kind of stuck to the corn husks during the cooking process. It was not a big deal, but if you want to make sure that the tamales roll out of the corn husk really easy, and you're adding cheese, just make sure you fully enclose the cheese. The tamales are done. I'm going to wrap these up and pop these in the fridge. When I was reading about how far in advance you can make tamales, you can make them about 3 days in advance and assemble them and keep them in your fridge. Or you can go ahead and freeze them at the state I just have them now before you steam them. We are having dinner tonight with my friends. Normally when I do big parties and things, this is not a huge party, this is just some friends coming over for dinner, and I'm making what I thought sounded delicious. But if I was to make these in advance, because I was gonna do some prep in advance, but it didn't end up working out that way, I could have made those the day before. Recipes also said you can make your beef and your masa mixture and your chicken or whatever your filling is, you can make those a couple days before as well and then assemble them. You don't have to assemble them and then store them for a couple days. So here, I have my roaster pan. I'm gonna bring this up to some pretty hot water. I don't know if it's gonna be boiling. We need this to unmold our flan cake. While this is coming up to temperature, we're gonna get going on our second dessert because I am not sure how well this flan dessert is going to turn out. So I wanted to have a backup. So my friend and her family that are coming over, her and her husband were in the Navy. I've been friends with her for this year, it's gonna be 25 years. And when she was in the Navy, she's not in the Navy anymore, I would make her Rice Krispie treats and send them to her in the mail. You could get a box, I think you can still get the boxes that you can fill them up as heavy as you want and you can ship them for, I think it was like $13 at the time or something like that. It was not much. And I would make her care packages. And then when she started dating her now husband, I would send him care packages. And one thing she always liked were Rice Krispies. So in case this cake doesn't turn out, we'll have a backup. And I'm gonna make these a little bit more elevated. We're gonna do brown butter Rice Krispies. And I have 1 stick of butter in here or a half a cup. The first time I made brown butter Rice Krispie treats, the recipe said to use 1 cup of butter, and I have found a half a cup of butter is plenty, especially if I use a higher quality butter because it just tastes so delicious. And it's gonna take a couple minutes for this to brown. This is salted butter, but I am gonna add 2 pinches of salt to this so that that balances the sweetness of the marshmallows. My canner has 5 minutes on it. The dishwasher is running. I've got some dishes in the sink that I could wash by hand. I don't think I'm gonna do any of that until I'm done with these Rice Krispies because if I take my eyes off this butter, it's going to burn. But what I do need to do, and I can do this quick, I need to grease a baking dish. One of you all gave the best suggestion when using spray spray it in your dishwasher or into your sink. I just forgot until I was done doing that. My butter is browned, so now I'm gonna add my marshmallows. I've always wanted to make Rice Krispie treats using homemade marshmallows, but I have never done that. I'm gonna turn the heat off for just a minute while these marshmallows melt. I can turn the heat back on. I just don't want that butter to get any darker. Here's where you really can tell the color difference, and it smells so toasty and delicious. I just turned the heat back on really low just to melt these marshmallows. We officially have one of our desserts, of our 2 desserts done. I am turning this water off. I have my platter for my other dessert, and I think this water is hot enough. I don't think I want it boiling because I don't want to melt my flan to release it from the pan, but I do want to soften it. So this has now been in the fridge for a few hours. It's pretty firm. It is, I would say, stuck to the pan. So what we're supposed to do, let me read the directions first, actually. Even though I made a backup dessert, I do want this dessert to come out. Loosen cake by placing bundt pan in a large bowl of hot water. Place a platter upside down on the cake pan, then flip and unmold the cake. Spoon any remaining caramel from the pan on top of the cake. That's it. Oh, you can make this up to 3 days ahead, store in an airtight container and refrigerate. I don't know how long, that's what I was looking for, is it didn't say how long to put it in here for. So I don't want to melt my flan. I feel like I've already left it in there too long. I've got to clean it up a little bit. Look at that. I didn't center it very well. I can't believe it worked. I had very little faith in that flan cake, or choco flan, that it was going to turn out. It was unlike anything I have ever made before, and it worked amazing. You're gonna see what it looks like cut into. It was so good though. So I asked my friend's husband what he wanted for dessert, and I told him I was making tamales, and he said he didn't really like flan, but I had never made flan before, and I wanted to try to make it. So instead of making just pure flan, I saw that recipe, and I thought, let's give that a try. He loved it. Everyone loved it. The Rice Krispie treats obviously went over huge, and that is why I decided to honestly make 2 desserts, is because I wanted to try my hand at making something I'd never made before, but then I also wanted a backup just in case it didn't go over well. The crazy thing to me is just how you layered that cake, caramel, cake, flan, and then in the oven it does this crazy thing, and it's caramel flan cake. I'm not exactly sure how the science works on that it's able to, transform like that while it's cooking in the oven, but it did, and it was fantastic. So I cut up the Rice Krispies. I got those on a serving tray. I'm gonna go ahead now and grab some linen so that we can get the table set. Again, this is a very chill and relaxing dinner. I'm just having some friends over. It's not a big dinner party or hoopla or anything like that, but I figured I'd go ahead and get the table set. I just grabbed out my white and black checkered placemats. I grabbed some red napkins, and then I have some mason jars for cups and some plates. Maybe in the future I will buy some actual glasses, but mason jars work just fine, and so that's what I have been using
basically, I don't know if I've ever owned actual drinking glasses. Maybe I have. Maybe when I get a piece of furniture to go in the kitchen that I can put things like actual barware and glasses, I will get some of those. But for now, mason jars work just fine. I'm going to get the table set, and then once we get the table set, I do want to do a little bit of cleaning in the kitchen. There's quite a few dishes that need to be handled. There are countertops that need to be wiped off. There are stove burners that have tons of boiled over things on it from cooking the broth and the chicken, letting that simmer away on the stove. I had some boiling over things, but nothing that can't be taken care of with a little bit of elbow grease. I did decide to light the candle a little early. It was only like 3:30 at this point when I set the table, but I love a candle, and so I get that lit. I get the stove cleaned, and then we're going to get the counter cleaned. And I did actually sweep and run the mop just a little bit because I had a lot of stuff spilt on the floor. So I did end up getting that done. And then once I get the kitchen clean, I am going to start our final side dish. So we have 2 different types of tamales. We have 2 different desserts, and then I'm going to have 2 different side dishes as well. You already saw the pinto beans that we made. Now I'm going to go ahead and get the Instant Pot on saute, and I've got some butter in there. I'm going to measure out some long grain rice, and I'm going to make a quick rice dish. I don't actually cook the rice until right before my friends come over, but I do want to toast up the rice really well in some butter to get that nice brown bits. And then I'm also going to toast up some taco seasoning in that butter so that it can get nice and toasty and delicious as well. Table is set, and now what we're going to do is actually start cooking the tamales. Everything is prepped and ready to go. I did take my rice out of the Instant Pot because I didn't want that to keep cooking. I'm going to wait a little bit longer before I start cooking the rice. It is 4:45 right now. My canner is done and has been done for a while. I've just been letting it cool. Open those. Just like that, I have 4 jars of canned chicken broth, which is amazing. I'm gonna let those cool a little bit longer and I'll get them out. But what I'm gonna cook these tamales in is actually my canner, my pressure canner. We're not pressure canning or pressure cooking these tamales, but we need to steam them, and I have found this is the easiest way for me to steam them because I don't own a steamer. Pressure canners come with these racks, and this is what we're going to use to create our steamer. I pulled my tamales out of the fridge. It is 4:46 right now. My friends are going to be here anywhere between 6 and 6:30. This, I think, is going to take a good hour and 15 minutes or so to cook. So I want to get them going now. I'm going to fill this with probably about 5 or 6 inches of water. Then I'm going to take some coffee mugs and layer them in my canner. I think that's what I did last time, and that worked fine. I could use canning jars. Maybe I'll use canning jars because I know that canning jars can handle this type of heat. I'm going to put one of my racks in the bottom of the canner, so these jars aren't sitting on the bottom of the canner. There is a little bit of space between the canner and the heating element. I need to make sure that I have enough water in here that for the hour and a half that it steams, I don't run out of water, because it would be a pain to have to put more water in here. I'm now going to put this rack on top of my canning jars. So this is what the setup looks like. Now I'm going to take one of these coffee mugs and put this in the center. This one's chipped. I probably should donate this or toss this one after today, so that's okay that I'm using that for this project. My dishes were gifts as a wedding gift, and I think we got enough for 8. Josh and I bought a few more, so we have enough for 12. And I didn't have to buy the coffee mugs because she found the remaining coffee mugs at the thrift store, which was pretty cool. So now what we're gonna do is actually start putting our tamales into the pot. I don't think I made enough to freeze. I'm gonna go ahead and cook all of these, and whatever we don't eat today, we're gonna consider meal prep. We love tamales, so they will not go to waste. I am going to start stacking my tamales. Oh, this is what I have to do. I have to push this to the side, and then I need to stuff something here. I have to remember how I did this because it's been a while since I've made them. Yeah, that's what I did.
Now I'm gonna start arranging my tamales. I think I can get all of them to fit in here, facing up. These are cold, so they are gonna take a while, and it does take a minute to get them stacked in here. We'll get it. What if I did like this? There we go. It's pretty easy to tell which one is which because at this point, at least, once they're cooked, we will see if I'm still gonna be able to tell. I should have counted these as I put them in here. I think I can get them all to fit. Now what you're supposed to do is cover it with more corn husks, but I don't have any more corn husks. We use them all, so I am going to go ahead and just use a towel. And this helps trap in the steam. And then I'm gonna go ahead and get the lid on this. I'm not gonna tighten the lid down. I'm just going to set it on here so that it will come to a boil faster. I officially have about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes until they get here. I'm excited to have this for dinner. This is what I was wanting. We have 2 desserts done. We have one of our sides completely done. I'm gonna turn this on in just a minute long, or maybe in about 10 minutes, and just warm this up. And then in probably about 15 minutes to a half an hour, I will start the rice. The salsa is done. I will pull out some sour cream. The table is set. I do need to put some ice and some water in the cups. And that is it. A very relaxing and kind of low-key way that we are gonna celebrate our second celebration, because we had a brunch with some friends, and now we're gonna have this dinner here. Just a nice, delicious dinner to kind of bring in the new year, start the new year on that foot, which I'm really, really looking forward to it. It's gonna be really relaxing, super chill, and just a nice way to enjoy this evening. I am done, basically. You will see how this whole dinner comes together, but the bulk, hard part is now over. My friend just texted me and said she's on her way. So I'm gonna get the beans on to warm up, and we're gonna start the rice. I did salt this, so now what we're gonna do is put in our liquid, and I need to measure out this liquid. This is some tomato juice. I need 4 cups of tomato juice, or of liquid. So if I don't have enough tomato juice, I'll just top it off with water. Give this a little mix. Now we officially have all aspects of this dinner either cooked or cooking. Get some things in here. The dishwasher was run and then it's unloaded now, so as dinner dishes are done through after dinner, we can just load them right up and we can go into the weekend. There's a spoon down here with hopefully a clean kitchen.
My friend, the tamales took an hour and 40 minutes to cook. I think because they were so cold, they took a very long time to cook, and I really jam-packed that steamer. So we had chips and salsa for dessert. I had time to make up some strawberry lemonade from the strawberry lemonade concentrate we had. And then once the tamales were finally cooked, I was able to take them out of the pot and plate them up. These were fantastic. Josh and I were able to enjoy not only these tamales, but the beans and rice for meal prep all throughout the weekend, and it was just a fun time being able to enjoy a beautiful meal with friends, but then also because this was such a big cooking day, I didn't have to cook for quite some time. So here is what the rice looks like. I pulled out some sour cream, 2 different homemade hot sauces, the pinto beans, and the tamales. This was a fantastic dinner. If you want to see how I made an entire Greek-inspired dinner for these same friends, I will put that video right here. Honestly, this Greek dinner was probably one of the best dinners I have ever made, ever. And so if you want some good dinner inspiration, go ahead and enjoy that. Here are the Rice Krispies. I sent home a ton of Rice Krispies for my friend, and the flan cake was a huge hit. Thank you for being here, friend. I can't wait to see you next time. Bye.